Welcome to the Tobii Eye Tracker 5 setup and installation guide. We take a look at the latest eye tracker, especially with regard to Star Citizen, what advantages and possibilities it can bring you, and of course how to install it and set it up in the game. In addition, you will receive an exclusive and free PDF with all functions simply explained, as well as recommendations for the setup. And this review is not sponsored or has received any grant. We paid the regular purchase price without a special promotion and ordered regularly. This test is free from any influence by the Swedish high-tech manufacturer Tobii. We received this small and inconspicuous package a few days after our order, which is visually nothing extraordinary but gives a valuable and stable impression. Besides the eye tracker itself, a special USB extension, 2 metal holders with adhesive strips, a flex mount and a short manual are included. The hardware installation is therefore very simple, using the magnets implemented in the back of the eye tracker. These are either attached to one of the metal plates directly on the monitor or to the flex mount, which also has adhesive strips. We tested several monitors here from curved to 43 inches and the hardware installation was always problem-free. And even though this mount is only magnetic, the eye tracker sits firmly in the mount even with slight vibrations. As soon as a connection is established via the USB 2.0 interface, we have already completed the hardware installation. A USB hub is not recommended, nor is the use of a USB extension other than the delivery version. With the current Windows 10 version installed, the drivers installs automatically and the necessary experience software is installed via the Microsoft Store. The Tobii 5 is set up and configured for the first time. The first thing to do is make sure that the markings on the screen match the faint lines of the eye tracker. The more accurate we calibrate these, the more accurate the tracking will be in the following. The 2 dots we see afterwards are the reflections of our pupils and irises, respectively illuminated by the weak infrared signal. And by the way, these slightly glowing infrared emitters are not disturbing even in complete darkness, although I would describe myself as a light sensitive. Officially, screens up to 30 inches are supported, but we have also tested much larger monitors and the test takes place on a 43-inch 4K screen without being able to perceive any restrictions. But let's start directly with the settings in Star Citizen, and here a recommendation first, namely the assignment of individual keys for the activation of the eye and head tracking. By the way, you will receive a detailed PDF with all relevant settings as well as the respective mode of operation and function. The description is included as a free download, so you can optimize all settings for you after this video, which will give you the best possible tracking experience. Under the item comms and head tracking, we then have a variety of partly confusing settings, but these we simply go through together. As a device, we select our Tobii in the list and leave the first functions in the default to be able to use our head tracking. Often here we also work with negations, after which a no setting can mean that we activate the function with it. Definitely in need of improvement. FPS stands for movement on foot and ADS, aim down sight, with nothing other than our aiming mode. Here your preferences decide. To help you decide, however, you have 2 sets of settings in the PDF that you can test. Roll stands for pure head tracking because Tobii not only converts your eye movements and you can use your head tilt to control the game. And external view means the third-person view on foot or the outside view of the ship. And up to this point, it's mainly settings that affect your preferences. Do you want to use Tobii on foot? Do you want your head tilt to be implemented as a movement? Here your personal taste decides. But now we come to the important settings by scrolling down until we discover no faceware settings, but Tobii settings. And here we are at first overwhelmed by countless sliders and numbers, but don't worry, we'll take care of that now. One of the most important values is the input mix. With the setting to 0 we will have a maximum effect of the eye tracking in the game, and with the setting 1 a pure head tracking, whereby the eye tracking would have no more effect in the game. We set this value to 1 for the time being, so we turn off the eye tracking completely, because you can see the effect step by step better and you can estimate and see how these settings affect more and more when we bring more and more eye tracking into the game. And as you can see, we are lowering the sensitiveness and effects a little bit at first, which I would also recommend to you if you're going to be using tracking technology for the first time. And with the dead zone settings we have more freedom of movement with the head without it immediately translating it into frantic movements in the game. But since these settings don't show what we can do with them in the game now, let's take a spin in the cockpit first. With this set of settings, we now have a pure head tracking, similar to other tracking systems activated. That means our eye movements are indeed represented by the overlay, so that you also see that our eye movements have no effect, but as movement-only head movements are converted by Tobii. By the way, this blurred circle is not visible in the game. We only activate it for illustration purposes to show you how the eye tracking works and how strong the respective settings are in the end. If we now move our eye through the cockpit, this area does not change, only if we move our head to it. And since we have Tobii activated in the outside view as well, we can cover a much more larger field of view with the head movements here as well, and thus have an almost too large field of view. Because if we turn all the way to the side, to the edge of the screen or downwards, we have so much field of view that we can almost see behind our ship. But Tobii is first and foremost an eye tracker, that's why we activate the input mix again under the settings and lower it a bit. We choose a setting of 0.9 here, which results in moderate eye tracking. And furthermore, we increase the responsiveness, that means the sensitivity of the eye tracking a little bit, and we also increase the head sensitivity a little bit. This way we have a highway effect of our head tracking even with smaller movements, and because of the activated eye tracking we have a good average value to get as much as possible out of our tracking. The rest of the settings we can safely leave at a standard or at our default settings because they do not directly affect the eye tracking. And here we already have a clear effect with eye tracking that is set relatively moderate. That is, if you look to the edge of the screen, then the screen also moves. If we now move the head along with it, we really have a clear range of motion that we can cover. But even with moderate setting, you have some time to get used to it, until the whole thing feels intuitive and normal. In the cockpit, we naturally have a much better overview, but especially when it comes to space combat, some getting used to is necessary. Because especially in the combination of head tracking and eye tracking, there are two input possibilities that can be combined and increased. For example, if we tilt our head to the side and still look in one direction at the same time, we have a clear swing in one direction or the other. Here is another comparison, only eye movements, that is pure eye tracking with a setting of 0.9 gaze, and we already have clear effects on our field of vision. If we now add our head to this, confusion is guaranteed at first, as orientation can quickly suffer. Therefore, we look at different settings, and since it's easier to do this on the ground, since we have more fixed points here and can estimate distances better, we simply go for a walk through Picture Square Grimhex. With a small amount of eye tracking, we can move quite a bit just with our eye movement, and if we then add the head, that's definitely enough to really be able to look in every angle. For direct comparison, we deactivate the eye tracking again. That means we set the input mix value to 1 and only the head tracking remains activated. If we now move our eyes to the edge of the screen, nothing happens. Our eyes are tracked, but this input is not converted. Only when we start to move our head, then we have a movement in the game and the view changes. This is more or less the same as conventional head tracking or alternatives in the tracking area. But wait, we wanted eye tracking. So we set the maximum of what your eyes can do, so we have a maximum implementation of our eye movements in the game. And how that looks like you can see here. No matter where we look, it is immediately and directly implemented. Very confusing and exhausting. So at least for me. So we go to the default input mix setting. I personally still find this one too hectic and very tiring, especially when playing for long periods of time. But here again we have arrived at personal preferences. One likes it, the other doesn't. Therefore, I present you my preference of eye tracking, which I also find pleasant in longer gaming sessions. Admittedly a very low eye tracking, but as you can see, eye movements are clearly visible even in this low intensity. Of course, it takes a relatively long time if you want to move the edge of the screen with your eyes, but I have found that I intuitively move my head slightly here, which then feels natural and is also implemented in the game. Therefore, in conclusion, my general recommendation, which I can give as a very good average after consultation with other users and especially thanks to the help of Xaxch from the Royal Retirement Lounge, who also created the PDF. Here we have a pleasant but not too weak eye tracking and achieve a good compromise of head and eye movements. And since we mentioned the roll function earlier, controlling by head tilt, here's a little demonstration so you can get an idea of it. I always have the feeling that I'm doing something unnatural with my head when I use this roll function. But there is another area that has its advantages when we use a head or eye tracker, and that is ground combat. Here, for example, we can aim forward, but with a head movement and pressing the F key, we can also select buttons and other ways of interaction. However, I would recommend you to disable the aim down side, so the aiming over the rear side with the Tobii Eye Tracker, because you hit here relatively poorly, especially if you are not used to it. Here I could not find any use of the eye tracker. However, basically in ground combat it definitely has its advantages, and if you can keep your target in sight and at the same time look to the side or back, it's awesome. Therefore, a clear recommendation to use head tracking in ground combat in principle. But of course we can do more with the Tobii, but first a small recommendation, and that's the sponsor of today's video. If you are looking for a logo, a graphic or an overlay for your Twitch stream, Wikerl is definitely the right place to go, at least my logos have always looked good to me. And a big thank you to Xaxch, who created this PDF overview. You can see all settings translated or optional in German and have the possibility to adjust your settings at any time, because you know exactly which setting had which effect, and also our suggestions for the configuration are included. You can find the download in our Discord. And with a small further tip, there is still a possibility to use the Tobii Eye Tracker 5 also with the eye control of Windows. Here you have then the possibility to control your windows again with the eyes. We can write text or other settings with our eyes let track. On Windows Hello you should work with it. The links for the Tobii Beta driver for this function, so that it runs under Windows, you will also find in the description. You can buy Tobii on the Tobii website. Here the price is the same with $229 or euros, so definitely not a bargain. I hope you liked the video and leave me a like and a subscribe here. The Tobii head tracker, or better said eye tracker with the number 5, is definitely a piece of high technology that you can stick on your screen. The advantages are obvious. We have another control option which feels intuitive, and you definitely have a bigger view of things here. But at this significant price, I think the Tobii Eye Tracker is only worth it if you don't plan on upgrading your hardware. You'll get more out of a current processor, 32GB of RAM or a reasonably current graphics card for now. But if you're looking for more immersion, are a technology enthusiast and don't have to worry about your FPS, then in my opinion the Tobii is worth it, because unlike other tracking methods, it also offers eye tracking in addition to head tracking, which is simply a way to have more influence on the controls. I would be interested in your experience in comments here. I will reply to each of them if possible. The draw for the giveaway of January is still running, but there is also a new giveaway for February. What it is you will find out in the next video. And at this point, a big thank you to all Patreons and channel members, you guys rock! Without you, the whole thing wouldn't be possible like this, and you bring the necessary motivation to deliver more videos in good quality. I say goodbye until next time and say, see you in the verse.